Afternoon, members. I'm going to do a very quick talk about growing seedlings and doing the cull. It's a question that I've been asked when I cull and how I go about it. So because I grow from seed and they're my hybrids, these are an example of little babies that were planted 12 months ago. They've been plugged out already into individual cell trays. And so they're technically little community pots. I'll just lift one out. So they're like a little community pot. There's probably 10 or so in each little plug. And they're going to stay in those plugs now until they toughen up. Once they've toughened up, they'll move into just a slightly larger pot that contains some fresh mix, and they continue to grow. I split them up so that they're in even less number of seedlings, so maybe a clump of 5 or 6 if I can, and then from there they'll grow on again with the new potting mix, which contains some fertilizer in food for seedlings. So it's a hydroponic mix that I use. After about another 3 to 6 months, they do progress very quickly from that size to the next size up. And from there, you're starting to get a coloration of your seedlings. So you can look at your selected Grex or your mum and dad plants, putting them together and making comparisons with the seedlings, whether or not it's something that you want to continue, and if you've got the space to continue growing them. So that one, for example, is a nice little pot. That's a couple of months old now. So that little Grex there was planted back in October of 2019, and we're in November of 22. So you think about it, 20, 21, 22, 2-year-old. So this is a 2-year-old little young seedling, which does have some good colour. And these ones are getting good size. So technically I may want to split that again and take away the one that doesn't have any colour at all and get rid of that now, but because I've got the space, I'll continue to grow it. Now, there is another in the Grex that hasn't progressed so much at all. There's not as much coloration in it. Still the same Grex, much bigger plant, but very green. Now, you're never going to get 2 plants that are the same when you're starting to hybridize. This is the point. We are trying to get different types of seedlings growing, and then we get to identify which ones we want to keep. Now, give them another 6 months growing in that medium, and that's probably the last time that I'll put them into the cocoa peat fibre, which helps to get them growing really fast and gives them their really good coloration. From there, they'll get moved into the next size up pots, and they'll start getting given the normal food that I feed to all of the bromeliads here, which is just the simple bark, sand and compost mix. From that, they progress fairly quickly, another 6 months. So between that one there and this one here is another 6 months. So then it's time to wait for it to flower. Now, if you've got a few in the Grex that look awfully similar, you can see there's quite a few here that look fairly similar. The idea is to select out the best of them. So I've already got another one that's behind me that I've already sent off for registration, which is coral. It's flowered, but its flower is very different to this one's flower. So you need to wait with a bilbergia for it to fully colour up and flower. Now, sometimes you actually have to wait for the second generation. So the second generation sometimes can look so much better than the first generation. The first generation can be reasonably boring. And so that one up there has been registered, this white one, and this one here went to the goats, but most people know this story. This one went to the goats. It's a small seedling, which is actually a mum. It flowered, was really boring, more or less, has no mottles, no nice coloration. It is spent now, but at the time it was really just a very plain, nondescript plant. However, it produced that seedling. That pup, that was growing on the side of it as a very young pup when I saved it, and then continued to grow it and ended up with that big one, which is ho-hum. And then this are 2 as well, pups that have come off mum. So the second generation, it turned out, were much better. It does happen occasionally, so sometimes you do need to grow them on a little while. growing them on once they've been registered and making sure that their pups actually do look like mum is the idea. So you do wait till you get a couple instead of just usually a single one, but you've got to wait for them to flower. Now when it comes to some of the seedlings, so these are a number of grexes that have been growing, and some of them have failed to thrive. Some of them are made from very small, because these are smaller bilbergers. Some of them were very small parentage and they're just not doing very well at all. A large portion of them I will not keep. This section here, however, are 2 grexes. They all are different, but there are also a few in this grex as well that I don't particularly favour. For example, that one in the front there. This one, compared to that one, is a lot different. This one here is a very boring plant. In my opinion, it wasn't what I wanted, and there's another one there that's much nicer. So that would be a cull. In this instant, I'm going to let them grow for another generation before I make my final decision. I have done a shoot cull already just to reduce it down to that number of plants. That's 2 grexes. So out of several hundred, I'm down to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 from 2 different grexes, 10 of each, and 5 from the last grex, which is here at the back. So the culling becomes quite ruthless as they colour up. Then the next stage is the flowering. If the flower is pretty bleh, then I won't keep it. These seedlings here that I'm showing you are the same age as those ones, but there's a few that are doing quite well in comparison to some of the others in the same tray. So same grexes, and they will just be discarded. As I'm potting on, I won't be potting on the little ones. I'll only be keeping the other ones that are growing much, much better. This pot here has got some really good pups growing. So this is a really good pupper, and that's already been proven on a few others from that grex. That particular grex is very good at producing pups and clumping early before flowering. So that's a really good one to keep as well. So it all depends on what traits it is that you are looking to select from, how much space you've got, how much time you've got to invest in doing the splitting, culling and growing them on. There are different ones that I'm growing, or example, all of these up the top are all Ross Draper hybrids. They are named, they are not registered yet, they're not been photographed in flower, they're not fully grown. They all need to continue to grow, so those ones get kept. They are seedlings. But when it comes to my own, I get a little bit more ruthless, and I will throw out dozens upon dozens at a time. Sometimes I regret it afterwards, but usually my decision is it's too late. They've gone to the goats. This pot here shows 2 that are doing really, really well, clumping up already. Got some nice mottles coloration forming. These are a young plant. Behind them are others from the same grex, which are more or less nondescript because they don't have all the mottling or anything happening with them yet. So I've plugged them at the back separately, and I'll continue to grow them and give them a chance. If they don't do as well as the first ones, then they will simply be pulled out and discarded to the goats as well. So I have that option where I can feed them to the goats. Lucky me. Otherwise they all have to go in the bin, because we don't want a million of the same, similar or boring plants when we're doing hybridization. We are trying to find something that hasn't been seen before, or that has a trait that's very different, or something that is very obvious to look at and able to be identified and named purely by looking at a plant. Most people can recognise humdinger now when they see it because it's been on the page so many times. I have got seeds growing as well from that one, but that one was a one-off. So there's a few very nice ones over on the other side, and there's also many here as well that will still need to be selected. As far as the babies go, when they're green and that size, there's no way of telling unless you are wanting to grow for size, and in which case you would be culling the ones that are not growing as well as the larger ones that are the same age. So there are some in the back here that are not as good as these ones here in the front. So there are 8 plugs here. That will go into 8 community pots in about 6 weeks or so time. That'll give them a chance to toughen up. Their foliage is too soft at the moment. It needs to toughen up. They've only had their lids off these ones for a couple of weeks, and definitely not be doing that to any of my elcants at this time of year, or any more of the near regelias. Our weather is just too unpredictable, from scorching hot weather one day to not. A lot of my culls will end up in the gardens here, in trees, etc., with the tags still in them to grow on, because they may be better in another couple of generations, like the curly one that's there. All right, so that's a couple of generations older, and that particular one is a one-off now. The rest of the Grex didn't overly curl the way this one does. This one needs to now grow on and see whether or not its offspring also have that very curly effect. There's one other in the Grex as well that has the curl, but a much larger open curl, but still cute. All right, so that's how I go about deciding how to go about culling. And like I said, it comes down to space, time, and exactly what trait it is that you are searching for when you're doing your hybrids. So really tall one in this case, rest of them are minis. These are actually all meant to be minis. This one is too big. It's going to get pulled out, even though there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not what I want. I'm growing mini near regelias, not whatever that was going to be. It's too big. All right, that's my quick chat. All right, thanks very much. Bye now.